Upwork, one of the biggest freelancer platforms in the world. Now, it's struggling. Revenue is flat. Their market cap has collapsed 86% from 7.5 billion to barely 1 billion. Now, they're laying off mass amounts of staff, and it's entirely Upwork's own fault. What happens when you keep stacking more and more fees on freelancers, when you try to squeeze your most loyal users for everything they have? This is the fall of Upwork. While remote work may be normal today, in the 2010s, people were still figuring out how to make it work. Freelancers and clients had to learn how to adapt workplace culture to relationships built entirely through a screen. How do you manage someone not in the office? How do you know they did work 10 hours and not just 2? To solve this, Elanso Desk, before it was called Upwork, introduced features like hourly tracking, activity logs, and periodic screenshots, as many as 6 times an hour. This sounds annoying, and it was, but it did have a purpose. I've only ever had one client fight me on hours, and I won, because those screen caps showed I was actively working on their project. I don't mind a client being able to see my screen. If I were billing a client without the tool, it would be their project on my screen anyway. But this doesn't work for everyone, and there were security concerns. One thing drew every freelancer in: a flat fee of 10% for any work done on the platform. Pretty great, but it wouldn't last. In May 2016, CEO Stefan Kozriel announced a new payment system, the sliding fee. Instead of the standard 10% commission, freelancers would now pay 20% on their first 500 with the client, 10% from 500 to 10,000, and 5% above that. At first, it didn't sound bad, and to some, it would even be a discount. The longer a freelancer worked with a client, the less they would pay. But there was a problem. Most jobs on Upwork were short-term gigs, fixing a website, designing social media posts, writing a script. As a result, many freelancers never earned enough from a single client to escape the 20% tier. But this was just the beginning. Upwork also introduced a 2.75% processing fee on client payments, meaning the platform was now taking a cut from both sides of the transaction. Sounds small, but that's on the entire job. Imagine a company spends $100,000 hiring freelancers through Upwork. This processing fee would add another $2,750 in costs. Not to mention the new monthly subscription fees clients had to pay. This weird dynamic spilled into client-freelancer relationships. Freelancers raised their rates to offset the fees. Clients pushed back to keep costs down. Not because of the value of the job and the work, but because of Upwork's strange fee system playing both sides. The backlash was immediate, but Upwork doubled down, saying, "While it's never easy to make a big change like this, we decided it was time to take this step to make Upwork an even better place for professional freelancers and clients." Upwork wasn't budging, and why would they? Revenue was booming. Remote work was becoming more and more popular, and people were beginning to notice. So on October 2nd, 2018, Upwork went public. Its IPO was priced at $15 per share for roughly 12.5 million shares. The stock opened at $23, a 53% jump, and closed at $21.18, up 41% on its first day. The IPO raised $187 million. This was a huge success, but also introduced another long-term problem. Upwork now had investors to please, and had to figure out how to extract even more cash from freelancers. So came another change, arguably worse than the first: Connects. Connects are basically virtual tokens freelancers must spend to submit proposals. A free account received about 10 per month, barely enough to apply for a single job, as many listings required between 7 and 25 connects just to click apply. Before this, you could send unlimited proposals to clients. Now, these connects are sold in bundles of 10 for $1.61. Freelancers were competing against others who could spend extra connects to boost the proposals to the top. In other words, you were paying for the privilege of applying to jobs you might never get. And it gets even worse. Over the years, the number of connects required kept climbing. For freelancers, income was now being cut from multiple directions: connects to bid on jobs, service fees on earnings, and withdrawal fees to access their money. As if that wasn't enough, the 60 free monthly connects were cut, with new freelancers getting just 20. Each connect was priced at 15 cents. But just like the job fee, this was framed as a benefit. I actually do not believe that this change will make it harder for new freelancers. There is some logic to this. This means fewer submissions to clients, and those clients, according to Upwork, had expressed feeling overwhelmed by the number of proposals they received in response to a posted project. Upwork said that on average, most freelancers will spend about $5 or less per month on connects, but the company didn't provide details on how it calculated that figure. With paid connects, we expect freelancers will submit fewer proposals, increasing your likelihood of winning projects and making it easier for clients to identify high-quality talent. But to many users, it felt like job hunting itself had become expensive and a way for Upwork to extract revenue. Imagine if Indeed charged you for every job you applied to. Then things just got better and better, for Upwork at least. The pandemic sent remote work into the mainstream. With COVID-19, 12% of the US workforce began freelancing, but among Gen Z workers aged 18 to 22, nearly half entered freelance work during the pandemic. At least according to a study by Upwork, so take it with a grain of salt. But there's no doubt freelance platforms were booming. Revenue in financial year 2019 climbed to $300 million, then $370 million, then to $500 million. By July 13, 2021, the stock had surged to $60.70. With no end of remote work growth in sight, despite all the anger and frustration from freelancers, what could go wrong? Quite a lot actually, especially when you consider something else. Upwork wasn't making any profit. And boy, they weren't close either. To attempt to get there, Upwork was about to start squeezing freelancers for everything they had. While Upwork was reporting record numbers, the backlash over its growing fees was still brewing. Pandemic-driven growth was so strong that it seemed that the anger over fees never dented growth, but it would show up soon enough. In the meantime, Upwork was giving that anger plenty of fuel. On April 26, 2023, Upwork seemed to listen. The flat 10% commission was reintroduced. The 20-10-5 tiers were scrapped. Wait, was Upwork actually listening now? Were they cutting down on the fees? It's a bit more complicated. Before the change, a $500 project incurred a 20% fee or $100. Under the new flat 10% system, that same project cost just $50. For a new freelancer, this was great news. They kept more of what they earned, but it doubled the fee on the platform's best freelancers. The 5% reward for building a long, high-value client relationship was gone. Under the new system, freelancers who had already crossed the $10,000 threshold were pushed back to a flat 10% instead of 5%. So it punished Upwork's most important customer, their loyal freelancers, who, needless to say, felt cheated. Their cost to Upwork literally doubled overnight because Upwork was feeling the pressure. After reporting a loss of $89.9 million in 2022, Upwork was keen to significantly accelerate their progress toward long-term profitability. They were cutting brand spend, streamlining the business, and of course, trying to increase fees. They concluded that the bulk of money made on the platform is made by the top-rated, expert-vetted freelancers and agencies, and it may not be most profitable for Upwork to charge a lower service fee to these higher-tier freelancers. But it gets worse. They added a $4.95 fee which was charged every time a new contract was created. It did not matter whether their job was a $50 gig or a $500 gig. Though this was from the client side, but we're not even done. In 2025, Upwork changed the rules again. The flat 10% fee was gone. Yes, again. But what replaced it was possibly the worst of all. A variable fee ranging from 0 to 15% set by a hidden algorithm. Essentially, Upwork replaced a predictable commission with dynamic pricing. The fee now depended on factors like supply and demand, competition in your skill category, and overall market conditions. the fee also wasn't even shown until you submitted a proposal. That's right, you didn't even know how much you were paying or what your profit margins were. Not only is it greedy, but the lack of transparency is extremely confusing. And once assigned, that percentage was locked in for the entire contract. Upwork claims this will balance the marketplace by tweaking fees based on supply, demand, complexity, and a bunch of vague factors. Translation: if you work in a competitive category, expect to be taxed for the privilege of existing. Two people doing similar jobs could be charged different percentages depending on how the algorithm classifies them. This also made recommending Upwork difficult because no one really knew how much they'd be making, and it gets weirder. Higher demand skills may even qualify for 0%. Sounds great, but very few would actually get this, and of course, it was Upwork's black box deciding all of this. On the outside, this was advertised as the 0% commission, as high demand skills may qualify for a 0% commission rate. While it advertises 0% rates, most freelancers still pay around 10 to 15%, often without knowing why. Just imagine trying to manage your work, clients, and make any profit with the platform making all these changes. Or imagine seeing one of these announced changes and thinking, oh great, fewer fees, then realizing it's actually more fees, but just for you in particular. The frustration which was simmering was now at a boiling point. But that wasn't the only problem. Upwork had another issue, and unfortunately, this one was baked in from the beginning. If you've watched this far, you might like our videos. We do a lot of deep dives into tech companies, so consider subscribing. If we look at Upwork's revenue, we can see great growth during the pandemic, almost $700 million in 2023. But as we all know, the remote work boom didn't really last. In Q1 2026, revenue grew year over year by 1%. That's not a decline, but just 1% growth signals a mature market. Stagnation, maturity, and soon, decline. The growth stage was over. So on May 7th, 2026, Upwork announced a restructuring plan that included cutting its workforce by approximately 24%, around 145 jobs out of 600. About a quarter of the whole company. Yikes. But something else was happening. Something worse. Upwork was one of the few platforms in the freelance world, but after the pandemic boom, that was different. After remote work exploded, more and more platforms began to pop up, many with better, more transparent pricing. Some more niche for specific industries, so many freelancers left, or at least they stopped signing up to Upwork. In 2018, Upwork was currently taking advantage of the lack of competition in this market. It wasn't the best place to find work, but it was one of the only places. But Upwork was now worse than ever. All of my Upwork career, I've been cautious about getting a bad review because of Upwork's horrendous appeal system. Then they increased fees, and now I can't even talk to a potential client who has literally shown interest in my services by clicking on my profile and inviting me. Over the past few months, I submitted proposals to around 150 jobs. I also saved many of those projects in my favorites so I could check them later. After checking them again, I found that only around 30 jobs actually hired someone. Upwork proposals are not even getting viewed in 2026, all of which made all the new platforms more appealing. And AI is only making things worse. Since ChatGPT's launch, freelance writing job postings have fallen by roughly 30%. On Upwork, writing projects were down 32% year over year in 2025. The entry-level work that once formed the backbone of the platform has been gutted, and with all the weird fees weighing on freelancers, it's understandable to see why Upwork might be dying. The outlook for Upwork isn't great. Market cap is near an all-time low. Its price-to-earnings ratio sits around 9, suggesting investors aren't expecting much growth from here. They are profitable now, but their GAAP net income is already down 17% year over year. So even after all that squeezing, future prospects aren't looking too good. Inside the platform, Active clients have been declining since 2025. They've annoyed all their core customers, and with their current pricing, I think they'll slowly decline as people move to better platforms, and that's probably for the best. They're not the only ones though. Fiverr has experienced a similar decline, though theirs is far more dramatic and weirder. Scandal after scandal, huge debt chasing growth in the pandemic, and a weird obsession with AI. Click here to learn the rest of that story, but until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.